I'm Russell, and this is Voice Over Work, an audiobook sampler. Where do you listen? Today's episode is brought to you by Newton Media Group and Patrick King. Today is August 30th, 2022. Patrick King's most recent audiobook is Stand Up for Yourself, Set Boundaries, and Stop Pleasing Others, if that's okay with you. Stand Up for Yourself is direct and no nonsense. That's because the way you prioritize others and let them stomp all over your boundaries isn't working, so you need to change. This book will teach you how to reverse these mini decisions and internalize the belief that you are worth it, you are valuable, and you deserve it, because you are and you do. This is the chapter-by-chapter preview of Patrick King's book, Stand Up for Yourself. Part 1. Why are some people people pleasers? Chapter 1. The need to be liked. Hey, could you stay late this evening and finish up all my work for me? There's a party tonight, and I'll miss it if I don't leave now. Oh, sure, of course. Do you need me to give you a lift there? People call them doormats, pushovers, or people pleasers. But whatever they're called, they all seem to have the same playbook. Be nice, be helpful, be kind, and no matter what you do, never, ever say no. In this book, we'll be looking closely at the seemingly irresistible need to please others at all costs and how to tackle the sometimes devastating effects of putting yourself last. We'll look at why you might be a people pleaser and what lies at the root of your mindset. This way, you can begin unpicking certain core beliefs so that you're empowered to set healthier boundaries and start to take charge of your life. People may tell you, just say no, just be firm. But the truth is, if you're a chronic people pleaser, it goes a lot deeper than this. We'll explore some easy tips and tricks to fake it till you make it, but we'll also take a closer look at how to make more lasting and fundamental changes. These changes will help you genuinely feel more content, composed, and confident in yourself so that you truly don't need to people please anymore. A wonderful thing happens when people give up people pleasing. They realize that when they're happy, balanced, and assertive, their relationships are actually more respectful, more intimate, and more real, not less. People-pleasing is a complex, learned behavior, but the good news is that with a little effort, you can shift your mindset and start to engage with others on more genuine, mature, and equal footing. No matter where you are right now, this book will show you how. One major cause of people-pleasing is the need to be liked. Are you a people-pleaser? Chances are you already know the answer to this question, but there is one telltale sign that may reveal a deeper problem. You constantly think, I wonder if they like me. Do they like how I look? Do they like my work? Do they think I'm interesting or intelligent or valuable? Am I needed? Do they like what I say or what I do? Do they like me? First things first, wanting to be liked is not a problem. It's human. We all seek out acceptance into a group and try hard to avoid being rejected. Humans evolved in small tribes in which being a part of the bigger whole was necessary for survival. Therefore, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with caring about the opinions of others, wanting their validation, or feeling good about yourself because they feel good about you. The trouble is, a people pleaser can have difficulty finding where to draw the line between this need to please and their own need for authenticity, dignity, and self-worth. In other words, it's a problem of balance. There are people out there who don't consider the opinions of others enough. They may be callous, inconsiderate, uncaring, or outright hostile to the ideas of pleasing other people. But if you're reading this book, chances are that you fall on the other end of the spectrum. When it comes to your own self-concept and worth as a human being, you give the opinions and actions of others too much weight. Here are a few examples in which... Chapter 2. Are you generous or just afraid of rejection? Some of us engage in people-pleasing because we desperately want other people's approval, validation, and liking. But sometimes people-pleasing can come from a slightly different place. Rejection sensitivity is what it sounds like, the heightened and unreasonable fear of someone rejecting you. More commonly, though, the real problem is all the stuff we do to avoid that perceived potential for rejection. One big way we can attempt to avoid the horror of being rejected is to engage in people-pleasing. Many people-pleasers feel awful at the prospect that they should be less kind, less generous, or less forgiving. But consider this. Is your motivation really compassion and kindness? Or is it sometimes an attempt, conscious or unconscious, to try to control people? If you view things this way, then you quickly realize that letting go of rejection, fears, and people-pleasing behaviors is precisely what will allow you to be more generous, or more genuinely generous. Being giving is a beautiful thing, but it's less beautiful when it's purely a strategy to help us moderate anxiety. A study in the 2016 academic journal Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, Dominguez et al., found that agreeable people had a tendency to people-please in order to avoid social stress. The researchers discovered, using fMRI scans, that when faced with an opportunity to say no, areas of the brain associated with cognitive dissonance lit up. However, when they said yes, these same areas went offline. What this suggests is that saying yes to requests is a way to reduce inner stress and uneasiness. Some might call it guilt. The authors had actually uncovered the physiological basis for that feeling of, I just can't say no. The fear of rejection causes us distress, but by saying yes, we quell that anxiety. So, being generous and giving is not really about the other person at all. It's about regulating ourselves. Of course, this doesn't always work out so well, because by saying yes, we open ourselves to being taken advantage of, to agreeing to things that actually violate our own boundaries, and to making our own feelings of calm dependent on us being generous and useful to others. So, what happens when we really do need to say no? Fearing a rejection, we may fail to set limits and boundaries, and we seem to get stuck in one-sided relationships with people who take and take. But once we're in these situations, we may feel even less able to say no. In other words, the anxiety about being rejected actually increases. For example, you've agreed to look after your friend's dog, even though you really don't have the time. You said yes just to keep the peace and avoid awkwardness. But now, he's asked you to look after the dog again, and he keeps asking. The pressure to say yes is even greater now. You've set a precedent, haven't you? So you keep saying yes. Before you know it, you're trapped in a sickening and reinforcing cycle of guilt and obligation. Perhaps in all this, your own dog sits at home, missing out on her walks while you're away, which makes you feel awful. You give and give and give, and yet you have low self-worth, you're stressed, and you're resentful. In comparison, the prospect of being rejected by your... Chapter 3. Fawning, a response to trauma. Picture a couple having an argument. Voices are raised and things are getting heated. Then all of a sudden, person A starts smiling sweetly. Look, let's just forget this whole thing, okay? It's all so silly. It doesn't matter. You're right about everything. Can I make you some cocoa with marshmallows? What else would you like? Person B is confused, wondering where all the hugs and kisses are coming from and what happened to the argument they were having only seconds ago. Person B has witnessed what is called the fawning response. In the face of trauma and conflict, some people respond with anger, some respond by fleeing, and some, like person A, respond with a flood of appeasing, soothing, and conciliatory behavior. Fight or flight is an option for some people, But for those with a history of trauma, another option when faced with threat is to go into fawning mode and try to make it all better. Picture an animal defensively rolling onto its back, trying to appear as meek and agreeable as possible so that it's spared by a powerful predator. Fawning is an attempt to fly under the radar rather than engage in conflict. It's a way of deflecting attention. In a crisis or disagreement, is your first instinct to soothe, calm, or please others? Do you do anything to avoid conflict, even if that means ignoring your own needs? In a stressful interaction, is your focus on other people's emotions? Fawning behavior is actually a kind of trauma response. This behavior, in other words, is something you might have learned in childhood, where rolling over this way was the only thing that helped you survive conflict. Some people may also find that their fawning behavior accompanies the tendency to freeze during conflict. Maybe your mind goes blank, your heart races, and you dissociate. You are the proverbial deer in the headlights. At the core of this fawning and freezing behavior is the unconscious core belief the price for peace with others is compliance. If I make other people happy, then I will be safe. The mindset is one where safety is all that matters, and your goal is to do whatever it takes to achieve that safety. Michael had an abusive father growing up. His father would get angry, yell, and break things around the home, going on rampages that would terrify the family. Early on, as a young and defenseless child, Michael learned that the best strategy was to do whatever it took to appease his father's anger. This meant agreeing with everything he said, quickly complying with any requests, and generally making himself as small and non-threatening as possible. After all, if he made one wrong move, his father would interpret it as a threat, and then more abuse would follow. Michael became so good at this strategy that he even learned to preempt his father's moods, walking on eggshells and finding ways to manage his strong emotions on his father's behalf. Here's the sad thing. This approach genuinely did work for Michael. It did prevent conflict and keep him safe. But in adulthood, Michael realized what this safety cost him. Those who use fawning behavior are often confused about their own boundaries, unable to meet their own needs, and, ironically, vulnerable to more abuse. Not all people pleasers are doing so as a part of a fawning response, but if this is the case for you, know that there are ways to heal and rewrite the narrative for yourself. Your task will be to change the core belief that compliance equals safety. Those with abusive backgrounds may also strike another. Chapter 4. Why conflict avoidance is actually a high-risk strategy. So far we've considered a few answers to the question, what causes people-pleasing? The need to be liked, the fear of rejection, the desire to stay safe. Let's consider one more cause of people-pleasing behavior, the need to avoid conflict. Here, conflict means disagreement, upsetting others, awkwardness, friction, misunderstanding, or just bad vibes in general. You don't have to have grown up in an abusive home to want to desperately avoid conflict, but you may nevertheless have internalized the lesson that not giving people what they want usually results in bad outcomes, and it's easier just to be nice and avoid rocking the boat. We've all done this at some point or other, whether it's biting our tongue when we really wanted to speak out, or pretending to go along with something just because the alternative seemed like too much to deal with. Again, there's nothing wrong with trying to avoid conflict, and there's nothing intrinsically valuable about disagreeing. The challenge for people pleasers is simply to find the right balance. Being a mediator who values harmony and cohesion is a great thing, and you can be proud of that if it's a skill you have. Being terrified of disagreement or inevitable bad feelings, on the other hand, is a problem. Conflict avoidance is where we avoid conflict at all costs. It's not the same as being easygoing, accommodating, or able to find mutual resolutions to problems. Conflict avoidance is where we carefully weigh up everyone's needs and find a solution that makes everyone happy, except we completely ignore ourselves in that equation. That's why, in fact, this strategy itself may become the problem. Here are some examples of conflict avoidance as a people-pleasing strategy. You quickly change the topic when someone says something wrong or offensive just to avoid calling them out or causing an argument. You put up with uncomfortable situations rather than kick up a fuss. You don't want to offend. You go silent or flee interactions rather than disagree and face awkwardness. You deny problems or how people feel about them. You'd rather swallow your own discomfort than cause it in someone else. You don't express yourself honestly in case it makes waves. You agree to unreasonable demands to keep the peace, but then grow resentful about it anyway. As with all forms of people-pleasing we've explored, conflict avoidance costs you something enormous: your authenticity. Honest communication and genuine intimacy fly out the window. Problems fester beneath the surface, and people are completely in the dark about how everyone truly feels. Most commonly, it's not conflict avoidance so much as conflict deferral. The problem often comes back to bite you later on. The terrible tale of the gunny sack. Gunny sacking is a sure sign of conflict avoidance and people-pleasing. This is how the tale of the gunny sack usually plays out. Melissa is the most junior member of her team at work, and a good decade younger than everyone else. Because she has low self-esteem, and she's petrified of causing a scene and potentially losing her job, she quietly puts up with behavior she really dislikes. She smiles and... Part 2. The People Pleaser's Survival Kit. Chapter 5. 6 different ways to say no. For habitual people pleasers, saying no can seem impossible. It doesn't matter if we've just been asked to break the laws of physics or be in 2 places at one time. If someone asks, we find ourselves saying yes and hoping we'll figure something out. In the last section, we considered all the deep roots of people-pleasing, but whatever your reason for doing it, rest assured that you can unlearn this behavior and do something different. Saying no is something that we can learn to do, even if we're not 100% confident, and even if we don't feel truly assertive yet. This chapter will work at expanding your no vocabulary, because there's a no for every occasion. Trevor Powell is a psychologist and assertiveness expert who's outlined 6 different ways to politely but assertively turn down a request. Direct no. This means what it sounds like. You simply say no. You don't follow up with an apology, explanation, or justification. You don't ask permission to say no or immediately launch into conciliatory behavior to make up for your refusal. Your no just stands there on its own, strong and bold. Think of it this way. The less you add to this brave and noble no, the stronger it is. Use a direct no when someone has violated a boundary, especially if it's not the first time. It's also good for outrageous or disrespectful requests. You want me to do your homework for you? No. Reasoned no. Take note. This is no with a reason, not an excuse. The reason is there to help the other person understand why you're saying no. It's not to exonerate you or open up room for negotiations. It's always perfectly okay to say no, even if you don't have a reason or don't want to share it. But giving a reason is a courteous thing to do. The only trick is to keep it brief and sincere. Again, the more you add, the less legitimate it will seem. I'm sorry I can't come. I'll be at my grandmother's birthday party that weekend. Reflecting no. This is more polite still because you acknowledge and reflect the asker's feelings and situation. I know it would be easier for you if I helped out, but I can't this time. This way, You are noticing and reflecting the other person's experience without letting it undermine your own boundary or dilute your no. It's a good idea to remember to omit the word but. Simply follow up your acknowledgement of their feelings with your polite refusal without making it seem as though these two things clash. Just remember that people tend to mentally erase everything that was said immediately before the word but. I know you're upset. I can't make it. Rain check no. You're not saying no forever and ever. You're just saying no right now. In the future, you may say yes. Your friend needs your help to move into their new apartment, but your mom has just died and you can't imagine facing anyone right now. You say no because you can't right now, but you do want to keep the door open for when your friend needs you in the future. I'm sorry. I can't do it. I can come over in a few weeks' time. Chapter 6. Everyone needs boundaries, including you. When you people please, you often deny your own needs. You take the hit and quietly resent it, or bite your tongue when you desperately need to speak up. Poor boundaries dent your self-esteem, weaken your genuine connection to others, and sometimes force you to try to meet your needs indirectly, with bad results. If all of this is true, then why do people continue to have poor boundaries and choose people-pleasing instead? The reason is because there are benefits to being a people-pleaser. It actually does pay off, at least in the short term. In the moment, you may feel popular and in demand. People may approve of you, and you may even get the addictive ego-stroking that comes with people openly acknowledging that you are sacrificing yourself. Oh, you're such a saint. Thank you so much. I don't know what I'd do without you. He's such a great guy. He'd give you the shirt off his back. You're my star employee. You're ultra productive, and nothing is ever too much trouble. This high is momentary, though. What's more, it's usually quite superficial, i.e., the approval you garner seems to rest entirely and exclusively on your doing what others wanted. How genuine could someone's approval and respect have really been if it shatters the moment you dare to have your own opinions, limits, or priorities? If you're the kind of person who has derived much of their self-identity from being nice, kind, accommodating, and charitable, this role can be hard to give up. That's why you need to remind yourself of how expensive it is, i.e., what it costs you, your self-esteem, your sense of calm and balance, your dignity, your time and resources, and the opportunity to pursue your own life on your own terms, according to your own values. That's a big price to pay. People-pleasing has some benefits, but it has far, far more drawbacks. Setting appropriate boundaries is an adult life skill that everyone needs to master. Many people-pleasers unconsciously think, oh, setting boundaries is something other people do, and they create a special exception for themselves. But it doesn't matter if you're a busy parent or an employee in a high-powered career. Everyone needs boundaries, including you. Before we look at how to set and maintain boundaries, let's consider a few deeper core beliefs that may be standing in the way. You may say, oh, I couldn't take a day off. The place would be a circus without me. But deep down, your reason for not setting boundaries at work is not really because you're needed. Beneath this excuse may be beliefs like, I don't deserve to get what I want or need. My needs aren't that important, or not as important as other people's. Having boundaries shows I'm weak and can't cope. Having boundaries means I'm selfish and indulgent. I may not want to do things, but I have to if I want approval, safety, attention, love, or validation. We've encountered these very same limiting and self-defeating beliefs before, and we've also seen they're just not accurate. If we want a happier, healthier life for ourselves, We need to seriously challenge these underlying assumptions, or nothing will change. Chapter 7, Being Assertive, or at least how to fake it till you make it. Think of someone you consider assertive. How do you think they act? We've spoken about how to verbally assert your boundaries and say no, but sometimes we need to simply be assertive. For example, the person pushing in front of us in the checkout line doesn't give us time to verbally respond. We need to be physically assertive enough to hold our ground. Even if we do say a few words like, "Excuse me," we need to make sure we're also sending the right nonverbal message loud and clear. In 2019, Matthew Barry and Stephen Brown did research on the vocal tones that actors employ when they want to play the role of someone who is assertive. Using method acting, these actors try to literally become the person they are portraying, changing their dress, posture, voice, and style of gesture accordingly. These outward mannerisms may seem superficial, but any good actor will tell you that they are powerful ways to control how others see you. Imagine someone who says the lines, "No, I can't do that." Someone could utter these words with the cocky, self-assured demeanor of Indiana Jones staring down a baddie, or they could say them like Milhouse from The Simpsons, who's just about to be punched by Nelson the bully. The words we say are often less important than the way those words are delivered. Through their experiments, published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, Barry and Brown discovered that there are 9 character types that vary in their degree of both assertiveness and cooperativeness. Bully, high assertiveness, low cooperativeness. King or queen, high assertiveness, medium cooperativeness. Hero or heroine, high assertiveness, high cooperativeness. Cynic, medium assertiveness, low cooperativeness. Self-portrayal, not acting, medium assertiveness, medium cooperativeness. Librarian, medium assertiveness, high cooperativeness. Recluse, low assertiveness, low cooperativeness. Loner, low assertiveness, medium cooperativeness. Lover, low assertiveness, high cooperativeness. For our purposes, both the lover and the loner could also be considered pushovers or people pleasers, since they are minimally assertive and keen on cooperating no matter what. Barry and Brown asked actors to give a performance based only on the above character descriptions, then analyzed audio and video of these actors compared to the baseline where the actors essentially played themselves. The researchers discovered that the most important communicators of assertiveness were pitch, loudness, and timbre of voice. Timbre here being wavering or stable. Speed of speech. Continuity, i.e., how many pauses or breaks there were. Based on their findings, they settled on 6 acting techniques that strongly conveyed a sense of assertiveness. Here's what they found. Raise the pitch of your voice. Do so without going into unnatural falsetto. Chapter 8, Assertive Communication. Speak loud, speak clear, and speak from the heart. Human beings are social animals. Plus, we all have needs. Communication is our interaction with other human beings in an attempt to have our needs met. However, the style of communication reflects how well we understand, communicate, and meet those needs. Because communication and needs go hand in hand, having a problem with people-pleasing means it's likely you also have a problem with direct, healthy communication. Aggressive communication means trying to get our needs met by yelling, forcing, coercing, intimidating, criticizing, or violating others' boundaries. Passive or passive-aggressive communication means trying to get our needs met indirectly by manipulation, silent treatment, playing victim, avoiding conflict to win approval, or waiting around until others feel guilted into giving us what we need. Both are attempts to meet needs, but they're seldom successful. The point of improving our communication skills, then, is to ensure that we are meeting our needs in the best way possible. Somewhere in the middle of those two extremes is healthy, assertive communication. This is where we're able to calmly, directly, and respectfully communicate our needs without violating boundaries or infringing on the needs of others. In the world of the people pleaser, needs are a zero-sum game, i.e., either they win or you do. Either you are happy or they are happy. But healthy, assertive communication recognizes a third possibility, that everyone can comfortably get their needs met without anyone having to give up their rights. If you master healthy, assertive communication, you will feel far more understood by others and will find you no longer stew over old resentments or disappointments. Your relationship will instantly become less stressful and more respectful. Plus, as a happy side effect, you're more likely to get the things you want and need. How do we communicate more assertively? Here are a few main principles to keep in mind and how we can apply these principles to everyday life. Feelings are never right or wrong. If you're a people pleaser, you may shy away from expressing your negative emotions because you feel they're wrong or worry that other people will judge you for them. But emotions are never right or wrong. They just are. We can judge our actions, and we can certainly say something about how we respond to our own feelings and emotions. But in themselves, these feelings and emotions are neutral, even the ones we call negative. This insight allows you to clearly and confidently state how you feel. You can express yourself without it making the other person wrong and without judging yourself, i.e., by apologizing for how you feel or carrying it with guilt or shame. When we know that emotions are neutral, we don't treat them as something to fear or resist or avoid. This way, they actually have a chance to do what emotions should do: flow on. Remember, no emotion is right or wrong, but how you express that emotion matters. For example, you may be afraid to take a risk that everyone is encouraging you to take. For example, launching a risky new business. But believe that... Part 3. Changing your mindset for good. Chapter 9. Don't take your inner critic's word for it. Here's a story you might be familiar with. Person A is trying to think of the perfect gift for Person B. Person A goes to great lengths to find just the right present, wrap it perfectly, and then give it to Person B. Almost immediately, though, Person A starts to think, maybe I spent too much on that gift. Maybe Person B secretly hates it and it's just too polite to say. What an idiot I was to assume they would like such a stupid gift. You'll never live it down. Everyone's going to wonder why on earth you bought such a strange gift. Meanwhile, almost completely unnoticed by Person A, is Person B thinking, oh cool, what a nice gift. People pleasers are often their own worst enemies. People-pleasing behavior can stem not from the outside world, but from a harsh inner critic, whose words may seldom correspond with actual reality. Sometimes people-pleasing can be an attempt to address the ongoing negative self-talk that is constantly self-critical and judgmental. The inner critic is like a reverse cheerleader and is there on the sidelines, constantly reinforcing the negative core beliefs you have about yourself and a catastrophic narrative about the world. An inner critic is sometimes understood to be the internalized voice of a real-life critic we had in our early childhood experiences. In other words, if you're a people pleaser today, you may have been a parent pleaser in the past. Trauma, abuse, rejection, And self-esteem issues can put us on the path of people-pleasing, where we start to believe that our worth and validation comes solely from satisfying others. Children unconsciously absorb certain messages about who they are and take on these beliefs for themselves in the form of the inner critic. As adults, we continue the same dynamic, but within ourselves. In place of the parent is now our own inner critic. Unless we satisfy that voice completely, we are worthless. The trouble is, the inner critic is never satisfied. The inner critic is, to put it mildly, a bully who is devoted to sabotaging you. It says things like, "You're not good enough. You're a loser, a bad person, an idiot, ugly, talentless. Whatever you do, it's going to turn out terribly. You're to blame because you're bad and you messed up." Face it, nobody actually loves you, and why would they? Life can't improve for you, ever. You're a failure. Just give up. Who do you think you are, putting up boundaries and asking for your needs to be met? Seeing the inner critic's script laid bare can be startling, but how many of us are carrying around beliefs exactly like this day after day? How many of us have held on to beliefs like this for so long that we don't even notice we have them anymore? The thoughts have crystallized and become our reality, become who we are. Luckily, it's never too late to become aware of the inner critic, challenge it, and replace it with something that's more on our side. Here are a few powerful suggestions to ask yourself whenever you notice that you're stressing out about pleasing. Chapter 10, How to Drop the People Pleaser's Worst Habit, Over-Apologizing. Sorry. You sure do say sorry a lot. I know, I'm sorry. It's a silly joke, but probably hits a little close to home for chronic people pleasers. Over-apologizing, or having an over-apologizing compulsion, can have a wide range of causes, but the most common is the need to please others. Here are a few examples. You raise your hand in class to ask the teacher a question, but preface it with, "Sorry, but can I just ask?" You apologize to the receptionist for calling to book an appointment. Sorry to bother you. I know you're busy, but it's as if that's not precisely what the receptionist's job is. The person in front of you in the checkout line is taking a long time. You smile at the people behind you in the queue. Sorry this is taking so long. But why do people over-apologize? Over-apologizing comes from a complicated mix of low self-esteem, the desire to please others, awkwardness and discomfort, conflict avoidance, anxiety, and sometimes a big helping of perfectionism thrown in, too. Sometimes over-apologizing is just a bad habit. You've probably noticed it's a kind of learned social behavior. For women especially, apologizing becomes a socialized way to signal submissiveness, compliance, cooperation, and even gratitude. We may be so used to apologizing that we do it on behalf of others, for things that haven't actually happened, or for things that we're not even in control of. We may apologize for nothing at all. For example, sorry, what's your name? The core beliefs informing the need to over-apologize are all the same ones we've already encountered in one form or another. I'm responsible for other people or other people's emotions. It's my job to meet people's needs. Hence, I need to apologize if I don't do what I should. It's my job to smooth things over and manage social situations. Conflict is not permitted. Even awkwardness or uncertainty is sometimes too much. I'm a bad person, and I usually do things wrong, so I better apologize in advance for all the ways I'm about to disappoint everyone. Apologizing makes people think you're polite, nice, and likable. Saying sorry when you've done something wrong is admirable. But when you over-apologize, you actually dilute this sentiment instead of amplifying it. You may appear to others as timid, weak, passive, and groveling. The irony is that you may elicit from people the very behavior that you're most trying to avoid. Worse still, you're at a loss for when you genuinely are remorseful and want to make amends. You have no words left, since sorry is completely overused. Luckily, over-apologizing is a bad habit that's not too difficult to break once you know you're doing it. Here are a few tips. Tip 1. Just keep quiet. Really. You can't say sorry if you're not talking. Pause before you apologize and double-check. Have you really done something that you need to apologize for? If an apology is in order. Chapter 11. Plugging into the energy source of self-validation. When we engage in people-pleasing, we're trying to extract validation, approval, and liking from other people. However, self-validation is the ability to provide all these things for ourselves. Self-validation means we accept our own experiences, thoughts, and feelings and acknowledge them as valid. When we do that, we no longer need people on the outside to affirm us, grant us permission, or tell us who we are. Without the anchor of self-validation, we're constantly and desperately looking to others, in effect asking them, "Who am I?" or "Do you think I'm worthy?" Being the unique person you are entails experiencing a range of complex emotions and thoughts, all of which you are fully entitled to have. As the individual you are no more or less eligible to take up space in the world or to live as you need to live than others are. Plus, you're the only real expert on what living this way ultimately means. Taking on board other people's wisdom and knowledge is a great idea. However, being a people pleaser means we dismiss all our own unique individuality and assume that other people's opinions, values, thoughts, and ideas are always more valuable than our own. You'll know that you lack self-validation if you've ever felt like you don't quite know what your opinion is, until you ask everyone else their opinion first. If you can learn to self-validate, i.e., to see that your experience is just as valid as anyone else's, then you'll have much less need to get that validation from others. You'll be unplugging from the shallow and inconsistent supply of external validation and instead hooking up to a deeper, more sustainable and genuine source of well-being that is inside you. You'll be able to see both your strengths and limitations and calmly claim them both without judgment or shame. Understand your needs and prioritize them. Live by your own values and standards rather than follow along with other people's. Set healthy boundaries and limits. Be able to resist peer pressure. Be kind to yourself. Be honest about how you feel and accept it. Have a strong and a more stable sense of identity. Have faith in your own judgment of things, even if nobody else agrees with you. You will naturally develop your own ability to self-validate as you practice some of the exercises in this book. But here are a few more ways to develop self-belief that doesn't depend on the fleeting approval of other people. Step 1. Be aware of what you feel. As a people pleaser, you're so used to focusing on other people's emotions that you can be a bit disconnected from your own. A good first step, then, is to become mindful of what is going on with you right now in the present moment. How do you feel? Can you give a label to this emotion? What thoughts are you having? Have any core beliefs been activated? By asking these questions, you're giving yourself the chance to reflect on your real, current experience and acknowledging that without blame or shame. Sometimes it makes a world of difference just to literally tell yourself, "I'm allowed to feel what I feel." Being aware of feelings can sometimes be difficult for people pleasers because we may believe that some feelings are bad or make us bad people. For example, we may feel angry, but deliberately stuff down this feeling because we have a core belief that strong emotions are. Part 4. Kind and compassionate, but not a doormat. Chapter 12. The Art of Compassion. Real compassion. As we move to the final part of this book, let's try to remember one thing. It's wonderful to be a people pleaser, if by this we mean caring for others and being kind, considerate, compassionate, and helpful. We are, after all, human beings, and we are built to derive enormous satisfaction and meaning from connecting with others in this way. But here's something that you might not have thought of before. People pleasers actually lack this capacity for true compassion and kindness. That's because they are unable to cultivate compassion for themselves. It's because their attempts to care and contribute actually stem from a lack of love for themselves. Wanting to give, to take care of, and to cooperate with others is a noble thing when it exists purely for its own sake. But for people pleasers, this noble instinct has become all tangled up. Pleasing others becomes a transaction or a deal. If I do what they want, they have to love me. An obligation with fearful consequences, or an uncontrollable expression of low self-worth. It may even be an unconscious attempt to control others to manage anxiety. In other words, it's got nothing to do with love, kindness, or connection. Many people might call you a big softy and urge you to toughen up and set boundaries. But perhaps your challenge is something else, i.e., to learn what real compassion looks like. In this chapter, we'll look at mindfulness and loving kindness practice as ways to help rescue our genuine compassion from our need to please. These two forces of meditation are about expanding your perspective and opening yourself to a deeper and more authentic sense of worthiness, both in yourself and in others. Mindfulness meditation for people pleasers. You may already meditate for stress release or more conscious living, but focusing on the present moment and nothing but the present moment is also an excellent practice for a people pleaser to develop. When you calmly embrace the moment without clinging or judgment, you become aware of your fleeting inner experiences and emotions instead of focusing on other people's. Most people pleasers are great at avoiding or denying their emotions. Realize that life ticks along just fine without you needing to step in and take care of everyone's problems for them. Learn to accept what is. This means acknowledging and facing reality without the knee-jerk impulse to change it, save it, fix it, avoid it, judge it, hold on to it, etc. Develop better mind-body connection so that you genuinely feel your emotions rather than just talk about them abstractly. Gain space to let your genuine hopes and dreams emerge and give yourself the opportunity to try on different perspectives without the pressure of adopting someone else's point of view. Finally, connect to something bigger than yourself, i.e., a spiritual dimension or God that you can rest in. It's a feeling of knowing that not everything is in your control and that you deserve love too. Mindfulness meditation is about one thing: presence, in this moment, as it is right now. Chapter 13. Breaking the illusory bonds of codependency. Sometimes people-pleasing is a symptom of a large cluster of behaviors called codependency. The term was originally used in the 1950s by Alcoholics Anonymous to refer to the partners of people battling substance abuse, i.e., one person was dependent on the substance and the other was codependent. Addiction therapists often notice that non-addicted partners would often indirectly enable and support the addiction and the toxic patterns it created. Today, the term applies to a broader range of behaviors when a person is reliant on another, whether that's physically, emotionally, mentally, or even spiritually. It's a style of attachment and a pattern or dynamic that emerges between people and comes in many different forms in many different types of relationships. What they all have in common, though, is porous boundaries, a poor sense of self-identity, enmeshment, and a misplaced sense of responsibility. In a codependent arrangement, there are two people. One is the giver, the other the taker. One chases and pursues, the other avoids and resists. One takes no responsibility for their actions, and the other agrees to take on that responsibility on their behalf. One person needs the other, and that person in turn needs to be needed. And frequently, one person plays the role of problem, while the other person runs around in a panic, trying to solve that problem, make excuses, rescue them, or please them. You'll know that codependency is part of your need to people please if you feel like you're always walking on eggshells. You're often checking in with the person or asking permission. You're always wondering what they'll think and what the consequence of certain actions will be for you. You're constantly apologizing to or for that person. You think of yourself as a savior and love that person even though they hurt you. You do anything to avoid conflict or upset. Your people-pleasing or weak boundaries seem to be limited to this one person. Leaving this person doesn't feel like an option because unconsciously you like that they need you. You're a shadow of your former self since you've known this person. You're constantly trying to figure out how to solve their problems for them. Caring about other people is normal, but in codependent dynamics, there is an imbalance that is destructive or flat-out abusive. Consider an example. Person A is battling late-stage cancer, but is acting in a self-destructive way and neglecting to take care of themselves. Person B steps in and forms a romantic relationship with Person A, who promptly becomes abusive. Person A lashes out and treats Person B like less than garbage. Everyone looks on and wonders why on earth Person B doesn't leave. Person B says, "How could I? It's true love." Person A doesn't mean it. They're just sick and they're scared. It's not their fault. What's really happening is that Person A's behavior is being supported and maintained by Person B's excuses and justifications. Because Person B actually enjoys being needed and playing the rescuer, there's no real reason to end the relationship. Person A escalates and tries to push Person B away with more and more extreme behavior, and Person B digs in their heels, even more convinced that they... Chapter 14, Charting Your Progress in Black and White. Writing down thoughts and feelings in a journal is an excellent way to get in touch with your experience, work through your options, and gain clarity, all in your own time and on your own terms. Writing is perfect for people pleasers because it slows everything down and lets you work through things outside of the heat of the moment. Some people read all the books and do all the exercises, but somehow, in a real-life moment with another person, they instantly revert to old, knee-jerk, people-pleasing behaviors. Journaling is something that you can do privately, and the many tiny changes you instigate in yourself accumulate so that the next time you're facing a potentially difficult situation, you're better equipped to manage it differently. The exercises, techniques, and mindset shifts outlined in this book are not designed to work magically overnight. While some of your progress will be swift and dramatic, other aspects of your tendency to people please may be more stubborn and slow to change. For some, cultivating a rock-solid sense of self, good boundaries, and crystal-clear communication is a life's work and a challenge that's never really complete. Whatever the case, your journal can be a secret weapon. A journal is a way to slow down and get a grip on what you're thinking and feeling, a way to track and monitor your progress. If you set goals and recognize milestones, you can see how far you've come. A place to explore childhood patterns, unpack core beliefs, and experiment with alternatives. A record to remind you of all the things you value, as well as affirmations, goals, dreams, and guiding values and principles. What you put in your journal is entirely up to you. Almost all of the exercises discussed so far can be engaged with in written form. Get creative. You could write down an imagined dialogue between you and your inner child, or write at the top of each page an affirmation or mantra that really speaks to you. Use your journal to add structure to your meditation practice. You could start and end each session with a journal entry, noting any patterns. Finally, the separation of tasks exercise is definitely something that benefits from pen and paper. Use a journal and be your own therapist. Whatever you use your journal for, remember that it's there for you and your use only. Don't share what you write with others, and remind yourself that you're not trying to create something likable or perfect or rational. A journal is a tool, like an external secondary brain that helps support your personal development. If you're not finding it easy to get started with journaling, here are a few open-ended prompts to get the juices flowing. Begin with a sentence fragment and just allow yourself to write down whatever emerges without judging or self-censoring. I'm afraid of. Taking care of people makes me feel. People love me because. I wish I could admit that. If I'm not in control, then that means. I secretly wish that. The golden rule for my life is. Other people should. You've reached the end of another episode of Voice Over Work, an audiobook sampler. Where do you listen? Connect with us at newtonmg.com and with the author at bit.ly/PK Consulting. See you on Saturday for our next episode.